When we imagine an Egyptian pharaoh, we picture absolute power, golden thrones and servants catering to every whim, while pyramids rise in the background. The popular image suggests a life of pure leisure and godlike authority. The reality was far more demanding. Pharaohs were not simply kings. They were considered living gods responsible for maintaining Ma'at. The cosmic order that kept the universe from collapsing into chaos. If the Nile didn't flood, if crops failed, if enemies invaded, the pharaoh had failed in his divine duty. Let's examine what a typical day actually looked like for an Egyptian pharaoh during the New Kingdom period, around 1400 BCE. The pharaoh's day began before sunrise, and this was not a matter of preference. As the living embodiment of the god Horus, the pharaoh was the high priest of every temple in Egypt and the only person truly able to communicate directly with the gods. While he delegated most priestly duties to others, certain morning rituals were so critical that the pharaoh himself had to perform them, either in the great temples or in his private palace sanctuary. Servants woke the pharaoh quietly, and the morning purification rituals began immediately. These were not merely for personal hygiene, but were laden with religious significance, with priests assisting in rites designed to purify and prepare the pharaoh for his role as the mediator between the gods and the people. The pharaoh was bathed and rubbed with sacred oils. Upon rising, pharaohs were met by a small army of servants who were responsible for their morning preparations, washing and perfuming them with rich oils. The dressing process was elaborate and symbolic. The pharaoh's attire was symbolic, from the iconic double crown representing the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, to the ceremonial headdresses like the Nemes headcloth worn during rituals. An army of dressers that specialized in everything from sandals to wigs would assemble the clothing. For morning temple rituals, the pharaoh wore perfect white linen, his ceremonial false beard, and one of his many divine crowns. Even the wigs had legal and social significance. Slaves couldn't wear them, and royal wigs were the most elaborate, sometimes including gold and silver threads. Once properly dressed, the pharaoh proceeded to the temple's inner shrine. He would break the clay seal on the door and wake the cult statue of the god, anoint it with oils, dress it in fine fabrics, and present it with a morning meal of bread, beer, and fruit. This single act was the most important of the pharaoh's daily duties. By feeding the god, he renewed the cosmic pact, ensuring the sun would rise and Ma'at was preserved for another day. This wasn't theatrical performance. The ancient Egyptians believed these rituals literally sustained the gods and maintained universal order. Ma'at was a goddess and a cosmic force of truth and divine order who ensured the regular inundation of the Nile, the protection of Egypt's borders from foreign powers, the continual movement of the sun on his daily circuit, and the success of the ruling dynasty. If the pharaoh failed in his morning duties, the consequences were cosmic, not merely political. After the gods were served, the pharaoh transitioned to his role as head of state. He moved to the great audience hall, where the real work began. As the living source of Ma'at, the pharaoh was the supreme judge of the land, with all laws coming from him and the most complex legal cases brought to his court. He heard disputes between high-ranking nobles and listened to appeals from commoners who felt they were wronged by lower courts. His word was final, his judgment considered divinely inspired. The vizier, essentially the pharaoh's prime minister, arrived with the daily report. The vizier was the pharaoh's right-hand man, overseeing the entire government and presenting a daily report on the state of the two lands. The pharaoh made final decisions on multiple fronts. Public works required constant attention. Reports on temple construction, canal projects, or progress on the pharaoh's own tomb. The king was responsible for ruling in keeping with Ma'at. And as this was a serious charge, he was thought to deserve luxuries in keeping with his status and the weight of his duties. Foreign affairs consumed significant time. Audiences with foreign dignitaries, ambassadors, and provincial governors were a common occurrence, as part of the pharaoh's job was to maintain diplomatic relations with allies and ensure the loyalty of Egypt's numerous vassal states. Letters from spies and allied kings required responses. Negotiations, alliances, and strategic decisions shaped the kingdom's destiny. The pharaoh read intelligence reports and made decisions that could mean war or peace. Resource management was equally demanding. The pharaoh approved budgets for everything from funding military campaigns to allocating grain supplies for artisans working on royal projects. Egypt's economy was centrally controlled, and the pharaoh's administration touched every aspect of production and distribution. Failed harvests, labor shortages, or construction delays all required his attention and decision-making. A key part of a pharaoh's duties was to be the smiting arm of Egypt, its protector and military commander, with the forces of chaos always pressing in on Egypt's borders. Even in peacetime, military readiness required constant oversight. The pharaoh met with top generals to review army readiness, inspected elite chariot divisions, and reviewed reports from border fortresses in Nubia to the south and Sinai to the east. Pharaohs were keen sportsmen, and sporting activities held a prominent place in their leisurely pursuits, serving not just to unwind, but also as a display of their strength, bravery, and skill as rulers. Chariot practice wasn't just recreation, it was military training. Pharaohs like Ramses II devoted much of their time to chariot racing and were accomplished charioteers both on and off the battlefield. Maintaining physical fitness and weapon skills was essential for a ruler expected to lead armies personally when war came. The military aspect of the pharaoh's role was not optional. The pharaoh's responsibilities included ensuring peace and political stability, performing all necessary religious rituals, seeing to the economic needs of his people, providing justice, and protecting the country from external and internal danger. Egyptian kings like Thutmose III and Ramses II led military campaigns beyond Egypt's borders, expanding the empire and defending against foreign threats. The pharaoh's reputation, and sometimes his legitimacy, depended on military success. The pharaoh's living quarters were not simple rooms, but vast palace complexes. At Malkata, Amenhotep III's palace, the royal apartment featured a bedroom, a dressing room, a private audience chamber, and a harem. The pharaohs who resided at palaces like Malkata led lavish lives with numerous servants who cooked, cleaned, and took care of other tasks. But this luxury came with complications. For most of their waking hours, pharaohs were constantly surrounded by people, with their posse of hangers-on, usually consisting of members of the royal court, which may have included officials, family members, nobles, servants, and royal bodyguards. Privacy was nearly impossible. On their outings, pharaohs were typically accompanied by a band of more than 50 people. Even traveling required an entourage. Managing the harem was its own administrative challenge. Pharaohs maintained harems with multiple wives and concubines, and the size of a pharaoh's harem was a testament to their wealth and power. Ramses II fathered over 100 children, though he wasn't exactly a hands-on father. The political implications of royal marriages, succession issues, and court intrigues required constant attention. Royal wives came from both Egyptian nobility and foreign kingdoms as part of diplomatic alliances. Each wife brought her own supporters and interests, creating factions within the palace. Malkata was managed by a veritable army of servants and staff, with remains of kitchens near the royal chamber as well as servant quarters, and the palace resembled a complete city, with officials in charge of different sections. Managing this massive household, coordinating servants, overseeing palace maintenance, and ensuring smooth operations required its own bureaucracy. Religious duties didn't end with the morning rituals. At certain times of the year, the pharaoh would have devoted even more of their daily schedule to religious worship. One of the most significant ceremonies was the Sed Festival, a grand jubilee celebrating the pharaoh's reign and reaffirming their divine legitimacy. involving processions, feasting, and elaborate rituals that highlighted the pharaoh's power and authority. After a pharaoh had been on the throne for 30 years, a jubilee was held, one of their most ancient rituals at which the mortal king reaffirmed his fitness to continue as king. This festival reminded everyone, including the pharaoh himself, that while the position was divine, the man holding it was mortal. The said festival required the pharaoh to demonstrate physical vigor, running between markers to prove he was still capable of ruling. Even on ordinary days, the pharaoh participated in afternoon and evening temple services. Offerings needed to be made at specific times. Festivals for different deities required the pharaoh's presence, or at least his symbolic participation. The Egyptian religious calendar was packed with observances that demanded royal attention. The pharaoh would have access to various foods, including bread, meat, fruits, honey, and wine. Evening meals were elaborate affairs, though nothing compared to the massive feasts held during festivals. The king, his queen, and family lived in a palace which was richly decorated and had their needs tended to by servants. The royal diet was vastly superior to what common Egyptians ate: fresh meat, exotic fruits, fine wines, but even these meals carried religious significance and ritual requirements. After supper, the pharaoh had some time for genuine leisure. The pharaohs lived in extravagant palaces, which featured beautifully landscaped gardens, providing serene sanctuaries where the ruler could retreat from the bustling affairs of the state. These gardens offered rare moments of peace. Some pharaohs enjoyed hunting, though even this was often ceremonial. The king is often depicted hunting, though almost without exception. Animals like lions and elephants were caught by royal game wardens and brought to preserves, where the king then hunted the beasts while surrounded by guards. Music and entertainment were available. Palace entertainers performed, and the pharaoh might enjoy watching dancers or listening to musicians. But even leisure was constrained by protocol and the ever-present court. A pharaoh couldn't simply wander off alone or engage in genuinely private activities. Every action was observed, recorded, and interpreted. Before going to sleep, more rituals of cleansing and purification were observed, ensuring a peaceful transition from wakefulness to dreams. The pharaoh then retired to his private chambers, surrounded by symbols of protection and guarded by loyal servants, embracing the respite that sleep offered. Even sleep was ritualized, with prayers and protective spells to ward off chaos and ensure the pharaoh's safe passage through the night. The preparation for sleep wasn't simply getting into bed. Servants attended to final ablutions. The pharaoh's sleeping chamber contained amulets and protective symbols. Guards stationed outside ensured security. The cycle would begin again before dawn, with the same critical morning rituals that maintained cosmic order. What was a day in the life of an Egyptian pharaoh like? It was demanding work, full of both earthly and divine obligations. Serving as both the head of a vast kingdom and the figurehead of a religion was no easy task. The pharaoh functioned simultaneously as religious leader, supreme judge, military commander, chief administrator, and living god. Each role carried enormous responsibilities and consequences. Historian Don Nardo writes that the kings enjoyed an existence largely free from want, with power and prestige, servants to do the menial work, plenty of free time to pursue leisure pursuits, fine clothes, and numerous luxuries in their homes. This was true. Pharaohs lived in luxury that most Egyptians couldn't imagine. They wore the finest linens, ate the best food, lived in magnificent palaces, and commanded vast resources. But luxury came with an impossible burden. If a plague swept through Thebes, the pharaoh had failed in his rituals. If the army was defeated, it meant Maat was broken, and the pharaoh had failed to keep cosmic order. While a simple farmer worried about his own small field, the pharaoh was personally responsible for the sun rising, the Nile flooding, and the health of every person in his kingdom. Natural disasters, military defeats, economic failures, all reflected divine displeasure with the pharaoh's performance. The ancient Egyptians were well aware that the king was mortal, though it was the power of kingship. which the king embodied, rather than the individual himself that was divine. This created psychological pressure. The pharaoh knew he would age, weaken, and die, yet he had to maintain the appearance of divine perfection and eternal strength. Illness, visible aging, or physical decline threatened not just his personal authority, but the cosmic order he represented. The pharaoh's daily routine reveals the gap between image and reality. Yes, there was gold, luxury, and absolute power, but there was also endless administrative work, constant religious obligations, the burden of military leadership, and the crushing responsibility of maintaining universal order. Every decision mattered not just politically, but cosmically. Every ritual performed or neglected could affect the entire kingdom's fate. This was the paradox of pharaonic life. The wealth and status were real, beyond what most people could comprehend. But so was the workload. The pharaoh was expected to be simultaneously a competent administrator, a successful military leader, a devout religious figure, and a living god whose every action maintained the universe. It wasn't a life of leisure interrupted by occasional duties. It was a relentless series of obligations punctuated by brief moments of carefully orchestrated luxury. That's the reality of pharaonic power. Gold and glory, yes, but also endless obligations and crushing responsibility. Drop a comment with another historical figure or period you want demystified. Subscribe for more deep dives into how people actually lived throughout history.